Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, January 17th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 228 days, the game against Michigan in 312 days. We have football to talk today, but first, a quick note about the Ohio State women's basketball team, which was just ranked second in this week's AP poll. That is the highest ranking in program history. They are 18-0. They host Northwestern Thursday at 6:30 at the Shot. You may want to go watch them. That is a pretty impressive start to the season for Kevin McGuff and his team. We talked about them a little bit last week with Matt Goldman on one of these shows. If you're not up to speed with the ladies, probably time to get up to speed with the women's basketball team. They've been having one heck of a season. Someone else who had one heck of a season, CJ Stroud. He just announced there was a lot of drama around his NFL draft declaration. Will he or won't he? There was all sorts of crazy rumors out there, all sorts of big numbers being thrown around. Well, CJ Stroud made his announcement on Monday, the day of the NFL draft declaration deadline. CJ Stroud is turning pro. His announcement in part says, "This process has been difficult and the decision one of the hardest I've ever had to make. As a kid, I dreamed of playing football at the highest level, and after much prayer, I've made the decision that it's time to turn those dreams into a reality. With that said, I'm declaring for the 2023 NFL draft, this ain't goodbye, Buckeye for life, CJ Stroud." Kevin Noon is my guest today of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Kevin, I think this is a decision that seemed like an absolute no-brainer to pretty much everyone involved 3 weeks ago. And then there was a whole lot of drama that sort of came up out of nowhere. But in the end, it feels like this kind of was a no-brainer decision for CJ Stroud.
Yeah, the longer it took, I think the more people allowed themselves to play the what-if game. But let's be honest, if you have until Monday to make a decision and you make the decision on Monday, you haven't done anything wrong. He didn't take it to overtime. This wasn't a 6-day network exemption or anything like that. He played within the rules. And I think there's some people that may be disappointed because they allowed themselves to play the fantasy game of what would it look like if he came back. And even more importantly, since there's a couple-day cooling down period at the back end of this week, to let guys who've declared to the NFL turn around and say, "Oh, just kidding." But, CJ Stroud certainly leaves Ohio State with his name in the record books for a lot of great performances, a lot of great numbers. Unfortunately, there were some places where the team came up a little bit short that people will be quick to point out, the detractors out there. But he's going to be part of a quarterback draft here in this NFL draft of 2023 that is very favorable. I think that the last images we had of him trying to lead Ohio State back against Georgia in a game that kind of got away from Ohio State in that fourth quarter are going to be the images that are going to ring true. And we're a month and a half away from the NFL scouting combine in Indianapolis, and that'll be the next step, hoping to be there. Very excited for CJ, and, conversely, very excited to see what's next for Ohio State.
Yeah, he's someone who, his legacy was something that was talked about a bunch during his career, which is kind of a little unusual, but it felt like, that was sort of a part of his conversation all along this year was, what's your legacy going to be? And he got asked about that, and it was kind of, that was one of those things where he didn't really ever give a real firm answer because that's sort of a complicated thing to ask in the middle of the process. It feels like he's probably going to be remembered not as well as he should be by Ohio State fans because he was not the one who gave up 42 points to Georgia in the college football playoff. And boy, you can play the what-if game. And boy, if they had just gotten one more stop at some point during that game, and then you're playing TCU for the national championship, how different does CJ Stroud's legacy look if they are national champions this year? And that's stuff that was all kind of out of CJ Stroud's control. So, yeah, it is a sort of a complicated question with him. In the end, though, we heard all sorts of crazy numbers getting thrown around and, millions of dollars from NIL and, if he was going to come back and all that kind of stuff. It feels like when you look at where he's probably going to get picked in this year's draft, the top of the draft in the quarterback class is probably Bryce Young and Will Levis and CJ Stroud in some order, probably not that order. It feels like this is something that, like you said, people sort of talk themselves into the fact that, there could be a decision here, but I think when you really kind of sit down and look at it and where he's probably going to get picked, this is probably not that difficult a decision.
No, and some of these NIL numbers were large. I mean, if you sit there and you say that he made $2 million this year. I mean, it's certainly a number I've heard people kind of throw around when you sit there and you look at he was driving a $200,000 G-Wagon on a lease and everything else. And certainly he's been able to put himself in a position to kind of change the lives of his mother and everything else. But that NFL money is very nice. You're not going to be able to get there with, to NFL money with NIL money. It's just not going to be the case when you're talking about somebody who's going to be a top 5, top 6 pick, depending on how the draft shakes out and, who moves up into certain positions. I think we will see people who will make NIL decisions who are probably a little lower in round 1. With a first round contract, it's a 4-year deal and there's a club option for a 5th. And then when you get to that second contract, that's where you start making $30 million a year plus. Obviously that's the goal. You want to get that. You want to get that timeline started to try and get to that second deal. This 2023 draft is much more favorable with Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, and then by extension Will Levis. I'm just not ready to put Will Levis on that level. I'm sure at the NFL Scouting Combine, when he's measured and everything else, people will be like, see, this is why he needs to be there. And, once again, that'll fade. It'll be a big game of bluff at that point, but he's just not at the level of the other 2 quarterbacks. Great for CJ. He really did not have a situation where he could have lost in certain degrees, but I think coming back was very risky. Could you imagine what would have happened if he would have come back and, God forbid, Ohio State lost to Michigan again? What does that do in the eyes of Ohio State fans? What does that do in the eyes of the NFL? There's something of we're here about raw data and how tall are you and where's how is your ball placement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you lose that rivalry game 3 times, there's going to be people that are going to sit there and have some red flags at that point. So probably best to get while the getting was good, especially with those images of the Georgia game being the last ones that we got.
And so he is off to the NFL. Now the question, of course, Kevin, is who's going to be Ohio State's starting quarterback this year? And this is an interesting kind of spring we're headed into because, this was, you've got Devin Brown, you've got Kyle McCord. Both were 5-star guys. McCord has been here an extra year. This is entering his 3rd year. Brown entering his 2nd year at Ohio State. So they both had a little time with Corey Dennis, with Ryan Day in this Ohio State offense. Both 5-star guys. This feels like the first, really legitimate quarterback race that we've seen going into the spring since probably Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow in 2018. Because once Justin Fields showed up in 2019, there was no question who Ohio State's starting quarterback was going to be. You can kind of, they didn't officially announce him until sometime in August, but spoiler alert, everyone knew it was going to be Justin Fields in the spring. In 2021, when it was C.J. Stroud and Jack Miller kind of battling for the starting job, yeah, they didn't announce it officially until the fall, but C.J. Stroud sure was getting a lot of first-team reps in the spring, and everyone you talk to, you kind of got the same answer. This year feels like it might be like a really legitimately a little bit more of an open quarterback contest between these 2 guys, between McCord and Brown, where you don't go into the spring with everyone kind of going, yeah, it's an open conversation, but we all know who's going to win it. This feels like there's really legitimately a question, who is going to be Ohio State's starting quarterback this fall?
Yeah, and even going back to 18, just kind of based on where things were, and Joe Burrow had dealt with an injury prior, and at that point, I really felt it was Dwayne's job to lose. So even this one may be bigger than that in terms of the uncertainty. And we certainly have done some shows where people have been like, well, I hope they don't wait until the last second to announce this. Well, they absolutely need to wait until the last second to announce this one. There is no upside in making a post-spring announcement or a summer announcement. Why would you be doing that? And I think this is going to be a battle that is going to go very much into the fall because you're going to go through spring and you're going to certainly gather a lot of things there. You certainly have to wonder what Ohio State's offensive line is going to look like there. And people are like, well, I want to put all these eggs into the spring game basket. Well, spring game is probably the least telling of any of the 15 practices that they run outside of the first one, when you're definitely in shorts and just trying to teach your young guys how to go through practice and how to be practice players. So I'm very interested. I can certainly make a very strong and compelling case for either quarterback to be the guy. I think we can all come to agreement that Lincoln Kienholz, why he will be here in the summer, probably will not be that guy because A, he won't be here in the spring. B, he is a true freshman and has not been in the program. C, he's from South Dakota. D, he's not even from the top division in South Dakota, but that doesn't take away from his talent. But he is a redshirt candidate at this point for sure. So it is a two-man race until we hear otherwise. If they were to bring in an additional body as kind of just a bit of an insurance policy, but you're not even sure what you get there, whether it's a Chris Cheginoff type or what. But plenty of coverage coming up here on Buckeye Huddle through the coming weeks and months on that one. And I really am excited about that because so many times we go into spring ball and it's like, okay, who's going to be the left guard? And it's not the most video-rich type of story. It is not the sexiest story out there, but we got a quarterback controversy, baby. That's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and if we're going to go back further than Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow, then you go back to the 2015 quarterback battle between J.T. Barrett and Cardale Jones, and that one was two guys battling for the starting job, but we had seen a bunch of both of them, so you sort of knew what you had out of both of them. This is two guys who are kind of virtually unknowns in a lot of ways because McCord had the one start against Akron in 2021, but I think he threw 16 for 20 or something like that this past season. I don't think that Devin Brown threw a pass all year or threw very few if he did.
Few of any.
Yeah, so these are two guys who really you haven't seen a whole heck of a lot. So we'll have a whole bunch of new data to start incorporating into decision making and all that once spring ball rolls around. But yeah, it is going to be a fascinating spring. And just to touch on the transfer portal thing, because I know people are that is sort of the natural question. Well, if you don't have a proven quarterback coming back, do you pull someone out of the portal? Do you go try and get Drake May from North Carolina or whoever it is? I mean, my sense is that is very unlikely to happen because you're basically be having to guarantee him the job, and at that point you're sort of chasing everyone else away, and that just doesn't seem. It seems like you are more in the market if they go for someone in the portal. You are more in the market for a Chris Chuganoff type than a Justin Fields type.
Absolutely, you're right, because if you bring in this guy and you promise him things, you may as well say goodbye to the quarterback depth that you have in the room because they've waited their turn to be able to compete. I mean, nothing is given. Nobody that's in the room right now has been told this is your job. They're going to have to go out there and get it. But you bring somebody in and say, well, this is your job. I mean, you just crush the room at that point. So yeah, you need to get somebody who's more of a depth guy, somebody who maybe has, played in Power 5 or Group of 5, maybe lost their job at this point, who doesn't necessarily have that option to walk right in somewhere and be that starter, but somebody, we've seen Ohio State have to go to its second quarterback. We've seen Ohio State have to go to its third quarterback. So, you just don't want to bring in somebody for the sake of bringing somebody in. Those 85 scholarship spots are highly coveted, and it's surprisingly how quick you run out of those numbers when you need them most. But you're not getting a Drake May at this point. I'll tell you that.
Well, it won't be Drake May. You heard it here first. Will it be Kyle McCord? Will it be Devin Brown? We will all find out together. And the best place to find out about that and all the other questions surrounding Ohio State football right now is at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Kevin and I and Tony covering the team, Mark Givler and Alex Kleitman on recruiting. We've got Justin Whitlatch and Devin Radcliffe and Ross Fulton covering on the X's and O's beat. We've got a fantastic team covering Ohio State from every possible angle. It's all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can sign up today. Going to be a lot of interesting stuff to talk about as transfer portal season. We are wrapping up the transfer portal window on the 19th, this transfer portal window, and then will Ohio State go into the portal to pull anyone out? We'll find out together. We'll find out who else, if there are any more Buckeyes headed to the portal now or after the spring, all the winter workouts, all the spring football. There's basketball too. There's women's basketball. Men's ice hockey just split a series against Michigan. Women's ice hockey just swept one of their big rivals, Wisconsin. Lots of really good stuff going on right now, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And of course, at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well. If you're watching this there, we would appreciate it if you hit that thumbs up button. and make sure you are subscribed to this channel. Kevin and Tony and I did like an hour and a half of live show on Monday afternoon, talking CJ Stroud and then answering all sorts of questions about Michigan and the future of the Ohio State program and national college football landscape and a whole bunch more stuff. All Houston Oilers, all the stuff, the burning questions you have to ask us. We answer them all on those live shows, and the best way to be a part of those is to make sure you are subscribed to our channel, hit that bell so you get notified when we do go live, and then you never miss anything. And then again, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. If you want to listen to this as a podcast, you can find this and all of our other great podcasts wherever fine podcasts are sold. Just search Buckeye Huddle. You can find this. You can find Buckeye Weekly. You can find Big Me Kickoff. You can find all the great shows from all the folks at Buckeye Huddle there. So that will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.